Now then, how are you doing? In a recent video I talked about how 2 years ago they released the first made in Japan Elvis album for 16 years, the first one since 1992. So in that time there have been some really good reissues on, for example, Friday Music Label, Simply Vinyl, Speaker's Corner, Music on Vinyl, BMG Legacy, and of course FTD. None of those were released as Japanese pressings. So they had a lot of choice, a lot of releases to choose from. Which one do you think they chose to release 2 years ago? Frankie and Johnny? No. Elvis Sings Hits from His Movies Volume 1? No. They chose this one. Elvis Presley, the debut album, of course. Now this album obviously appeals to fans who would want to buy a new reissue, but it also appeals to other people in the vinyl community, people who are not necessarily Elvis fans, but who recognize the historical importance of this album. Now I have a slight confession to make. I called this video a sealed to revealed, but in actual fact the LP comes in a plastic cover. It's not in shrink wrap. So really it should perhaps be called bagged to revealed, but it doesn't sound as good as sealed to revealed. Now, the reason why Japanese LPs are not packaged in shrink wrap is because of the obi. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is an album I got recently. This is the 1962 pressing of the Elvis album, and you can see it has quite superb red obi. At the time, actually, in the 60s, most of Elvis's albums had a blue obi, like the one we just looked at, but this one had a red obi. So what someone has done with this cover at some point is they've put it in a very tight plastic cover, which actually, I'm not sure if you can see this, but it extends into just inside the pocket of the cover, and it fits very snugly over the top like shrink wrap. Now the good thing about that is it's kept the cover really clean, and the obi, which is actually even more important because the obi is much rarer than the cover. The downside, a very slight downside, you may be able to see this or maybe not, but there's a slight ripple across the top here, and that is of course because when you put the obi on, there's going to be some air between the obi and the jacket. So that's why they don't use shrink wrap on Japanese LP covers. Now, at one point, CBS or Columbia, they did actually experiment, or they did use shrink wrap for their albums, on albums like this one here. This is a Miles Davis album, In a Silent Way. So you can see that the obi here is going across the top, and it folds over to the back cover. So this was known as a cap obi. Now because it doesn't reach down to the bottom on either side, you can actually put shrink wrap on this cover without getting any air trapped between the obi and the cover. So it works with a cover like this, but not with a cover like this. So that's why this comes in a open plastic cover and not shrink wrap. So the first album, Elvis's first album, it was not released in Japan like that until 1962, when it came out in mono and stereo as a 12-inch. The original Elvis Presley album, or the first album in Japan, was released as a 10-inch, and it had that iconic front cover, but it had different tracks, and it was, as I say, on a 10-inch. So I mentioned that in another video which I did. And it was also released in 1970, which is this pressing here. This version had the lyrics on the back cover. Now this one actually has its original plastic cover. Japanese albums were originally released in these very thin plastic covers, which open at the top here and protect the obi, of course. And it was then released again in 1973 This is a 1973 reissue. Both this one and the 1971 are in stereo, so it was not available on mono for a long time. And then the back cover is the same as the original US version, so this was the first time it appeared with the photos on the back cover. And there's also an insert with the lyrics in English. The 1985 pressing I showed you in another video. That was a mono one, and again 1992 was also a mono pressing. Alright, so let's turn our attention to this this one here. So this is the new one, 1998. So as you can see here, it has the obi, and there are some differences between this obi and the original obi. I'll just point out a couple for you. So at the top you can see there's an RCA logo, whereas on the original one they used the Nipper logo. And over here it says RCA Records, whereas on the Japanese one it had the Victor logo and Nipper the dog. So Sony, I guess, doesn't have legal rights to use the Victor name and the Nipper the dog. On the back of the obi you have the song titles and information about the album here in Japanese. And it also states it's released in 1956, and this is a 2018 remaster. Okay, shall we get this out of the bag? Let me just tell you about the stickers first of all. You can see there are 3 hype stickers on the front. The first one tells you that this is part of a series of analog reissues. There are a couple of others that I know of in this series. One is 52nd Street by Billy Joel and Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. The second circular sticker is about a free download for the album. That's expired now. And the third one contains information about the record itself. It says it recreates, it's what do you call it? A replica of the original American cover. And the label. Okay, so I haven't seen the label yet, but it says it's a replica of the original RCA label. And it says the obi is a replica of the original Japanese design. We've just talked about that. And it also says it comes with liner notes. And where is it now? I saw something about... there we go, yeah. It's remastered 2018 Sony Music Studios Tokyo remaster, and it says the whole thing, the cutting master was made and the stampers were made, and the manufacturing all done at Sony, inside Sony Music Group. So it's a completely in-house production. Okay, so without further ado, let's have a look at this. So there's the cover, and one thing I like about this, I'm guessing that because the barcode is on the obi here, I'm guessing that it's not going to be on the cover. So if I just slide that across, I should be able to confirm that. I'm wrong. There is a barcode on the cover. Well, that's a slight disappointment. Going back to the front, you can see they've used the pale pink lettering that was used on the original American one. Well, there's the label. So much for the faithful reproduction of the original album. It just says RCA Records, which is a shame because you don't have Nipper. But I guess it's no surprise, since they couldn't put it on the obi, they can't put it on the label either. Alright, let's have a look at the inserts. I think I read somewhere that this is 180 gram. It certainly feels very heavy. Oh wow, there's a lot of pages in here. There's something else in here as well. Maybe this is to do with the download. Yeah, this is a download card. Right, so what do we have here? We have Japanese inserts. This looks like it's 4 pages. English lyrics on the back. If I can just get in here. Yeah, so it's similar to the 1992 releases. It's got the Japanese liner notes and Japanese lyrics, as well as the English lyrics. And, oh, okay, so this is an inner sleeve. Plain paper inner sleeve. It's quite smooth on the inside, so I guess that's not going to scratch the record. So once again, there's the front cover with the nice light pink lettering, and the back cover, same as the American release as well. Again, there are some subtle differences at the bottom here because of copyright information has changed and so on. But yeah, I've never had such a clean copy. Of course, it's brand new, so the white is just stunningly white. I feel I can imagine what it felt like to buy this album back in 1956. Surely no one who bought that album back then knew how significant this album would be, or how famous Elvis would become. But here we are in 2020, 64 years later, and people are still making this record. People are still buying this record, and people are still listening to this record on a faraway continent, and people with a completely different culture. So I think that speaks to the power of music in general, and to Elvis's music also. So what else is there to say, except a wop bop a loop bop, a lot bam boom. Thanks for watching. Take care.